just about all to change. And the only problem with that, nobody really likes change. Unless it's their idea. And that's the problem. For example, when the girlfriend says to the boyfriend, I think we should date others. Sounds like change, right? Who's the only one of those two that likes change at that point? Girlfriend. Who's no longer girlfriend. Because she's already got other options in mind, right? Usually. Or if the guy says, well, I think we just need to slow things down. I think we should see others. Translation. I already got something on the side, and I don't need you anymore. Nobody likes change unless it's their idea. Same type of thing, honestly, with everyone that you talked about this week. For example, now, unfortunately, I didn't get a B in chapels as much as I wanted to. Things with the pool and other stuff. Appreciate all the help and the number of different ones that did that. But tell you what, make it easier on me. From this section over here, tell me from this week, tell me somebody who had their name changed. Somebody you talked about, somebody in chapels, somebody who God changed their name. Who? Gideon. All right, there you go. Was Gideon thrilled with that? No. No, he wasn't too excited about it. Nobody likes change unless it's their idea. I think it was God's idea. Anybody else in this section think of another person? Yeah, who? Abram. Abram. We find it so hard to even say Abram. It sounds like a mutter or something like that instead of Abraham. Was Abraham, now we're not really necessarily told about it, but do you get the idea Abram was real thrilled about the idea of this whole change thing? Not so much. I mean, he did it, but it's like, what are you going to do when God says, hey, we got to go? Well, unless you're Jonah, it's like, you're right, God, got to go the other way. This section right in here, can you think of somebody else? Yeah. Saul had his name changed. Was he real thrilled about it? Well, I don't know. Ask him. He's blind. He's got 3 days praying about it. Not necessarily something you can think of. And who else? Peter. That's who we're going to talk about this morning. We'll settle with that. Peter's going to have his name changed too. As a matter of fact, in John, did most of you grab your Bibles this morning since you got it? Yeah, okay, well, we'll do it this way. It's in John chapter 1. First time he sees Jesus, and Jesus is already throwing everything upside down. First encounter with him. For example, John chapter 1, verse 35, the following day, John was again standing with two of his disciples, and as Jesus walked by, this is John the Baptist, okay? John looks at him and he says, look, there's the Lamb of God. When John's two disciples heard this, they followed Jesus. He looked around and he saw them following, and he says, what do you want? They replied, Rabbi, which means teacher, where are you staying? Come and see, he said. It was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon when they went with him to the place where they were staying. Where he was staying, they remained with him the rest of the day. Verse 40 of John 1, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, was one of these men who heard what John said and then followed Jesus. Andrew went to find his brother Simon and told him, we found the Messiah, which means the Christ. Andrew brought Simon then to meet Jesus, and looking intently at Simon, Jesus said, your name's Simon, son of John. Or some of your translations might even say son of John. Kind of the same thing, right? Your name's Simon, son of John, but you'll be called Cephas, which means Peter. Both of them refer to rock. Okay? Somebody that was just always there. Now, little audience participation. Okay? From some of you. First king of Israel was King Saul, right? Do you remember, anybody here in the audience remember why King Saul was the obvious choice? David, what do you remember about that?
He's so tall.
He was so much taller than everybody else. And if you're looking for a king to lead you, if you're looking for a king to go out and do battle for you, to lead the charge, I mean, you want John Wayne out front, right? You don't want Jimmy Kimmel. You want John Wayne. You want somebody big, tall, obvious. You know, you want Dwayne Johnson. You want The Rock out front, not Jimmy. Some of you know what it's like to be the go-to guy. Generic. Some of you girls know what it is. You know, in volleyball or basketball, you know what it is to have a team counting on you. You're the setter, you know what it is. You have to get there to get that ball right where it needs to be for the set spot. And how awful does it feel if you're the spiker to be the one who goes up and whiffs or sensitive in that? Some of you guys know what it is to be the go-to guy. For example, Courtney last night talked about being a quarterback. And it's just that person that you just always look to. I'm thinking that's who Peter was. For example, talk to this section, talk to this section. Now I'm going to come over here and talk to you guys, okay? This is your chance to participation. What do you remember about Peter? Simon Peter, it says. Just what kind of guy was he? What's he doing? What do you know about Simon Peter? No, you don't have to quote a verse. Just anything about it.
Impetuous.
He was a guy who was always going to jump in, right? You can think maybe of a couple of different illustrations of that. He was always the first one. And honestly, you do that often enough, and what starts to happen? When the opportunity presents itself, everybody kind of automatically turns and looks at you. They expect you to be the one to answer. They expect you to be the one to have the answer in class. They expect you to be the one to be able to score. They expect you to be the one to step up and make a difference. I got an idea that's what Peter was always like. Before Jesus said everything. Here's the thing. I'm not necessarily sure that you see a whole lot of difference in what Peter was like before, or in what Peter was like before and what he was like afterwards. For example, let's think about this. But just one comes off the top of my head. When Jesus asked toward the time when he was going to be betrayed, right? Have you guys got any swords? Peter was the one who said, yeah, we've got two. And I have an idea they might just as both well been his. Just a hunch. And later on that night, when they came to arrest Jesus, who was it that drew the sword and cut off Malchus's ear? Same guy you'd expect to. I mean, seriously, are you going to look at Matthew, the tax collector, the accountant? Mm-hmm. Matthew, take him. For a paper wad, give you a paper cut, make you stop. You're not going to expect Matthew, the accountant, to take him down. You're going to look to Peter, right? And just as an idea, just kind of have to take up. Let me use your visual. Stand up. Ooh, Claudia, I need you. No. Okay. Like the roll of Jesus. Like the roll of Malchus. Okay? Judas comes up, gives Jesus a kiss on the cheek. They all know it's him. The guys say, take him. You're part of this crowd. You're going to take control of Jesus. He's got to walk through. How are you going to do this? I mean, you're going to come around in front? You're going to come around behind? Yeah. You're going to take him like that. And in all likelihood, if you're going to try to control this guy that you're obviously really worried about, because they came with clubs and swords and they were fully armed. I mean, they're just ready to come in with shock and awe here, right? You're probably not just going to say, okay, come on, let's go. In all likelihood, you may even throw him to the ground. Now, at this point, he's trying to contain or control this Jesus. He's probably going to be behind him. My guess is you might even be tying his hands, right? If Jesus is here, Malchus comes from this side. My guess is that the disciples, Peter and the crew, they're all back here. Right? Because on that side over there, those are the Romans. Those are the soldiers. Those are the ones that are coming. Which means, if Peter's stepping up, he's got a clear shot. Guess who? Sorry about your luck, dude. But he's going to draw his sword. And if he's drawing his sword, I'm guessing maybe he was right-handed. I don't know. Just a hunch. If he draws his sword, he's drawing it out like this, and he's coming back to him. Now, he's not just right beside him. He's probably trying to step back a little bit, which means he's going to make some noise. When he comes up to him, he's going to have a couple of quick steps. Malchus is going to hear the movement. He's going to hear a couple of quick steps. He's going to turn, and what do you see? He's coming. Now, he's probably not coming in like this. He's probably coming in. He's got the sword, and he's coming not for his hair in his ears. He's coming for his head.
Yep.
That's Peter, the go-to guy. You know that Andrew's in the back saying, brother, yeah! You know, and he missed him! Get him again! You know, try it, get up there. You know, in the meantime, Malchus is like, ah! Whatever, and Jesus, you know, he's kind of down. I'm guessing he's down on his knees, or at least he goes back to him, kind of turns around, what now? You know, and that's kind of who Peter was too. He was the what now guy. What are you going to do now? Nobody likes change. Peter didn't like change when the idea came that Jesus is going to be taken and killed and crucified. And he tried to explain it to him. And Peter's the one who jumps up and says, "Nuh-uh, it's not going to happen. You know, may it never be. God forbid." And Jesus looks at Peter because Peter doesn't like change. And he says, "Would you knock it off?" You've got in mind things of men, not God. Now, we can talk about Peter and Jesus and Malchus and swords and the dark of night and clubs and all that. But sometimes it's hard to really catch. Sometimes we don't have a whole lot of control over the changes in our life. And one of the things that we get to experience, that we've got to experience, when you're married to a preacher and the preacher loses his job, translation, gets fired. What kind of effect does that have on mama and the kids?
Not such a good one, because it's not supposed to be that way. You know, you do the right thing, you love the people, you meet their needs, you think it's going to be fine, but obviously, some people didn't like that. So it's hard on mama because you got to uproot everything, deal with your own emotions, and also deal with your kids' emotions again.
Because you got the emotions of, okay, well, let's just say it.
Not to mention emotions against him.
That was the right word. Why would you feel bad about me?
Well, you're supposed to make it all right. It wasn't supposed to be this way. What did you do to cause?
So there's the suspicion of what did you do to mess up? There's the frustration with, here we go again. We've got to start all over. There's the having to deal with the kids because now they have to move. They have to uproot. How do you tell the kids? I got fired again. How do you tell the kids we got to move? You got to leave your friends. Yeah, not cool. Nobody likes change. True. Sometimes, though, the preacher is not the one who messes up. Sometimes you're doing the best you know how. Sometimes you're doing the church thing, you're doing the God thing, you're doing the marriage thing, and you're giving it everything you got, and things look fine. Tell us a little bit about how that fits where you're at.
Okay.
Great.
Okay.
you use a mic?
Can you hear me? Let me know.
Use a mic.
Trust me, I've been in the kitchen with her, she'll be fine.
I'll use that one. Actually, you just got that. Okay, I got married shortly after high school, and thought I married a Christian man that had a true heart for God. I was raised in a Christian home, and that's one of the prerequisites of who I married. I wanted to make sure that I had a Christian man in my life and a Christian father for my children someday.
So you made the right choices, apparently.
Yeah, I thought.
You thought you were making the right
Yeah,
choice.
right. I prayed
Had the
about
right
it.
priorities.
I prayed about it, right. And I didn't get a, red flag that this is not what you're supposed to do. But that was not the case. The person that I married was not the man that I thought he was. And we were married for 17 years. And I came to find out that for a majority of those 17 years, he had been living a separate life that I was not aware of. He had separate bank accounts, post office box, things like that. And he was choosing to live a homosexual lifestyle, which did not include, obviously, our two kids. Nick, who was then 12, and Olivia, who then was 6, and myself. So besides the whole fact of coming home one day from work as normal, actually it was in June of 2000. It was the last day of school for my kids, and we usually went out to eat to celebrate the beginning of summer and so forth. Instead of doing our normal going out to eat, I was sitting on the couch telling my two children when they got home from school that their dad had left us. All that I knew was what he had left me in an email while I was at work that day. He did not tell us where he was. And after some investigation and a few little time passed, that is when I found out about his other lifestyle that he'd been living for the majority of our 17 years together. I felt extremely rejected, lied to, hurt. I was hurt for my children. I didn't want that for their dad. I didn't want that for our family. But I had no control over the choices that he made that put our family in this situation. So then it came to the point of, how am I going to deal with this? And I came to the realization that you cannot always choose the situation that you are in or what you are experiencing at the time, whether it's through your own choices, the choices of someone else that affects you, or the choices that God, chooses for you to make changes with. But I found that I can choose how I respond to that situation. And praise God, I was raised in a Christian home, and I chose the Lord. I'm not saying I was perfect and I did everything right. I tried to. Of course, there were a lot of emotional up and downs. There's anger, there's hurt, there's rejection, there's fear, there's fear for my children. I wanted my children raised in a Christian home, and now my entire life at one email was turned upside down for what I thought I had going as a Christian home.
So how did God get you through that?
So I prayed to God constantly. I told him, I said, I don't know what I'm going to do in this situation. I don't know what you have planned for me. There were times that I felt so broken that I couldn't even utter words out. So I would play praise music and just listen to the words. And it was almost my prayer through the music to God is, help me, show me the way, show me what I need to do as a single mom at 37 with 2 children. And also starting over financially, because besides the whole situation of him leaving the family, on top of the homosexual lifestyle that he chose, he also had made some financial changes that I was not aware of that also affected us. So starting over financially, from ground zero at 37, well, that's when you're supposed to be starting to get your feet on the ground. and it wasn't. So God was gracious. He put wonderful Christian people in my path. He put father figures in my children's lives through my son's sports teams with his coaches, with men through our church, other family members, women that actually had gone through the same thing that I had. There were a couple. You know, 'cause I felt like it was an isolated case, and it's not, unfortunately. But God is good, and I hung on to this verse in Jeremiah, and it's so true, because no matter what situation we face, we do have this verse to hang on to. And it says, this is God speaking, and he says, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you, not to harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future." And so I hung on to that situation, and throughout my prayers to God, I prayed for a good Christian man, true Christian man to come into my life, somebody that would be the father figure for my children that they did not have, someone that could guide our home as a Christian leader. And if you would have told me, 12 years ago, that I would be standing up here telling you how happy I am, how blessed I feel, what God has done with my life to turn that entire mess for myself and my children into a wonderful life, I would have not believed.
Sure.
I would have not believed it, and he has done that for me, and it's only by the grace of God that we're here today and able to stand up.
One of the things I forgot to ask Claudia that we talked about, and want to talk about with all of them is, so how did God get us? How did God get you through everything changing?
Well, God always knows what he's doing. He goes before us, and he knows what our future is going to be, so he always puts somebody or something in your life that will help sustain you through the future that you don't see coming. And it was this place that we made lifelong friends. And that's another thing, guys. You need to choose friends that you can surround yourself with that will help you do the right thing. Because a lot of times when you're going through a lot of turmoil, struggles, you got a lot of emotions going on, up and down. A lot of times you can't sort it all out yourself. You need somebody that's strong in the Lord that will help you do that. And that's how I got through it, by lifelong friends that I met here. I know you've heard Ryan say that a lot of times, but it's true. Because they were never in the same town and congregation that we worshiped in, but they were mutual friends that we could call on anytime, and they would pray with us on the phone, and they would love us through it. So lifelong friends that God put in our life many, many years ago that have continued to be our friends up until this day, as well as them encouraging me to get into the Word. And Trudy read one, and I want to read one to you. It's in Isaiah 46, 4. It says, "Even in your old age," which I really like now, gray hairs and all, "I am He, I am the one who will sustain you. I have made you, and I will carry you." And I mean, a lot of times that's all I had to hang on to, that knowing God was going to carry me even when I didn't feel like it, or even when I didn't have my friends around. He says, "I will sustain you, and I will rescue you." So that gave me hope, knowing it wouldn't be this way forever. Even if we were moving again and again and again, He was still with me and was going to sustain me. Isaiah 46.
4. Verse 4.
4. Verse 4.
see that with Peter, you know, as he spent time with Jesus, and as you see, you know, the different things happen throughout his life, you begin to get the feeling that Peter just wishes that God would change somebody else. You know, don't you need to work on, like, oh, I don't know, Judas? Just guessing. Everybody knows he's a thief. Everybody knows you can't trust him. Jesus, you kind of blew it. You put him in charge of the money bag. You know, and there's that angst of, well, what about him? What about him? What about him? Peter even says that when he finally has a chance to get back with Jesus after the resurrection. He meets him on the beach. They have some breakfast together. Jesus says, Peter, you know, let's take a walk together. And he begins to tell him how things are not always going to be the same. They're going to change. Things are going to be different. This is not Peter's idea either. And so he begins to look around and he sees his good friend John over there and he says, but what about him? What about him? And Jesus says essentially, don't worry about him. You just need to worry about yourself. Kind of like what you'd hear maybe from mom and dad or grandpa type thing. We keep hoping that God will change our circumstances, but God doesn't necessarily always change our circumstances. Sometimes, you know, almost always, He's working on changing us. Katie has some circumstances in her life. I want you to kind of meet some of the kitchen staff, okay? That you're not used to seeing and get to know a little bit about their backstory. Katie's had some circumstances in her life that she wishes were different, you know. Why don't you tell them just briefly about those family circumstances?
Well, my family is very broken. Growing up, my dad used to verbally abuse us, and that was enough to break me. I went to a deep depression, and I used to cut myself. I always wanted to die all the time. And then when I got older, I did things I shouldn't have done, you know, drugs and boys and everything you shouldn't do when you're a teenager. But it took for me to, I was with a guy who he physically abused me, and so that's when I was just like, man, I gotta change. It broke me. I was just humbled before God, but I didn't want to give up everything. I still wanted to get high. So one time when I was really high, I felt like I was dying. I felt like I was descending. I can't explain it, but and then God spoke to me. He said, you know, you're suffering, and I don't want you to suffer anymore. So I just, from there on, I just completely changed. I begged for his forgiveness. I was like, I mean, instantly, I hated drugs. I hated everything evil.
Well, that's just it. How did God continue to work on changing you? And how did He help you make that transition? And
Just
what's it like now?
now that I seek Him, He fills me with so much joy and hope. It's just amazing how you can completely change someone, and the reward you get for just putting your trust in Him. You don't have to go through all that pain. He'll take it all away if you give it to Him.
And just a little bit, or more? Just a little bit, or more, or how does He? I'm sorry, I lost you. You talked about, you know, how great the pain was before, but everything that you had compared to what you have now.
Oh, I mean, now it's like all that stuff in my past is just memories. I just give Him all my pain. I still have problems. Like, I have a lot of fear and anxiety, but the more I give it to Him, there's just, it's so great the love He gives you when you go to Him every time. This is really hard for me.
Coming to camp was really hard for somebody that's got some social anxiety. Can I just say that, you know, but she was willing to do that. I appreciate what God's given you since then. Again, along that theme of, you know, one, we want him to change everything. We just want it to go away. We just want it to be better. And it doesn't always get better. Brooke has had a long-term relationship with God. About how long?
7 years.
You realize most marriages don't last 7 years, and you dated this guy for 7 years? What? And yet, where's that? Where's that now? What's happening?
Just recently, I ended a relationship with a guy that I had been with for 7 years. We were high school sweethearts. We started dating when we were like 13.
Now that make you like 40 later.
Yeah, we were like 13, and we, I had never had been with anyone, like had a relationship with anyone before him, and neither of us had, and we had this great thing going, and we were so young. We grew up together. We grew up in our relationship, and people change when you grow up like that. We did get engaged, and once we got engaged, things just spiraled down from there. He, in the beginning, he would come to church with me occasionally. He was raised in a Christian home, but that really wasn't his lifestyle, his choice of lifestyle. And I could definitely, especially tell that, after we got engaged, I wanted him to, be making the choices with me, be going to do things, because I want a husband. I want a man who is a good husband to me, who can lead me in Christ, and who will be a good father, a good Christian example to my kids. So,
So what took so long?
I was gonna make it work. I was gonna fix him. I was gonna fix us. I was going to, be that Christian, that only Christian example to him, to show him the love of God through me. Like, that I will always forgive you.
And that's what you need in a marriage, okay? That's not necessarily what you need when you're dating. That's why they call it dating, not marriage. You're dating so that you can learn what that person's like, so that you can learn what it takes in a relationship, so that when you have that wedding, when you become married, then you can practice that forgiveness, you practice that tolerance, you practice that mercy, and you show that strength for each other. When you grow up in church, everything you hear about relationships, though, makes it sound like every relationship ought to be like marriage. It's okay. It's okay to use the brain God gave you to realize this is not going where it needs to go. And make some choices and make some hard decisions. That something's got to change. So how'd God get you through this? Let's wrap up with that.
God has really, he showed me that I was worth so much more than what I was getting. And he put great Christian friends in my life who mean the world to me. And this is all pretty recent in my life. And this week especially has just been an answered prayer for me. He's like, that whole, this week, Ryan told each of us to choose a place that we would want to pray over before camp started. And I headed right to the gate. I'm like, I want to leave all of my heartache and all of my past there. And let God fill me with his love, because he says I'm worth it.
Awesome.
What it comes down to, quite simply, is that recognition that even though change scares us with us when it's not our idea. The only way we can get through that fear is when we know that we have a stronger trust. I asked earlier if you brought your Bible, so I want you to turn to one last passage. It's in the Old Testament. It's 1 Chronicles, chapter 28. David realizes that things are not always going to be the same with him. David realizes he's king, he's been king, things have gone well, God's blessed him, but as good as it's been, it's not always going to stay that way. He's going to have to pass the torch on to somebody else because things are going to change. Realizing that, there's just some things that in 1 Chronicles 28 that David feels compelled to tell people. And especially, not just his son, but also all the people of Israel. Chapter 28 is longer than what I want to take time to read now. But there are a few passages in here that I want to share with you. If you pick up in verse 8 of 1 Chronicles 28, it says this. So now with God as our witness, and in the sight of all of Israel, the Lord's assembly, I give you this charge. Be careful to obey all the commands of the Lord your God, so that you may continue to possess this good land and leave it to your children as a permanent inheritance. You see, he's concerned and aware now that yes, things are going to change, but we need to make sure that there's one thing that doesn't change, and that is that we give those who come after that the same chance that we have. That's why Claudia and I were concerned about the effect it was having on our kids when things happened to us that we didn't have any control over. That's why Trudy was concerned about the effect on her kids when things happened that she didn't have any control over. Even though she'd done the right thing, supposedly, and she'd been all that she was supposed to be as far as she knew it, she still had the dirty end of the stick in her hand. What do you do now? The same type of thing with Katie. You know, because of the home situation and Dad was out of control, and the effect it had on her, all of a sudden her life was out of control. And there's that desire to have something more, and you saw the same thing with Brooke. There's that desire that this can't go on. Things have got to change. I've got to make sure that my future is different than my past. Then he turns to his son, in verse 9, says, Solomon, my son, learn to know the God of your ancestors intimately. Learn to know the God of your ancestors intimately. Worship and serve Him with your whole heart and a willing mind. You know, last night at Fire Circle, we're singing this one song, and you know, we've sung it a lot. You probably remember it. There's that one line in there about, you know, being the God of Jacob. You know, remember that? And it just kind of hit me. You know, we sing that, we don't even think about it. You know, well, yeah, Jacob, Bible name, you know, Bible guy, God of Jacob, yeah. Well, especially in regard to this verse, David says to his son, you need to learn to know the God of your ancestors. And I thought, hang on, this will rattle your cage, okay? Well, others say, I want to know the God of Claudia. Well, others say, I want to know the God of Trudy. And because of their trust, will others be willing to say, because of what they see in you, I want to know the God of Katie and Brooke. I want that God. Matter of fact, the next time, well, the rest of the time we kept singing that song last night, when we get to that line about, oh God of Jacob, I have to admit I didn't sing that part out loud because inside my head and inside my heart, I selfishly say, I want to know the God there. I want you to know my God there. That's what David says to Solomon. When things are going to change, in the middle of all the change, know this. The Lord sees every heart. He knows every plan and every thought. If you seek Him, you will find Him. But if you forsake Him, then He'll reject you forever. Take this seriously. For God has chosen you to build a temple as his sanctuary. Be strong and do the work. We've all got work to do. It may be a tabernacle, it may be something different, it may be a temple, but, you know, God has told us and expects us to do what he's called us to do in this life. That means some things will probably have to change in your life, but know this, and I'll wrap up here. Seek it. Because if you seek it, you will find it. All week long. That's what you've heard. With Abram, with Aaron, with Gideon, with all of the others, this is the recurring theme. Seek